tonight, Kian's joined us to talk about polyvagal theory in clinical practice, and is going to give an overview of polyvagal theory for those of you that are new to it, or perhaps new to applying it in clinical practice as a body worker. Kian and I met about 8 years ago, and we've been on a few professional trainings together. And this is the first time that we've had him at eHealth to give a webinar, but it's a great occasion for me, having experienced Kian hosting some wonderful trainings with Betty Martin, the Wheel of Consent like a Pro in 2015, and Kimberly Ann Johnson and Ellen Heed in 2016, the STREAM training. So that's scar tissue remediation, education and management. And Kian runs the Sexological Bodywork UK training with Katie Sara, and formed ASIS, what does that stand for, Kian?
Association of Somatic and Integrative Sexologists.
Yeah. Which is the only UK governing body for people who do sexual trauma and working with the pelvis. Is that right? Of its kind?
It's a professional organisation rather than a governing body, and
Right.
it's does somatic sexology, which could be talk-based, could be a surrogate, it could be a variety of different modalities.
Sure. So, is there anything else we should know about you, Kian, for tonight, or have I covered it?
I think that's good.
Great. So, welcome to this webinar, those of you that have joined us, and I know many of you have met and worked with Kian. So you're going to give us a little introduction to what you're going to talk about tonight, and John is very knowledgeable on the polyvagal theory as well. Last week we had Kian's business partner, Katie Sara, who did the hidden drivers, the emotional command system. So this is a great follow-on to that. And if you want to go back in our archive and check that one out, I urge you to do so. And Katie's going to come back and follow on from that webinar. And we're going to share the screen, she and I, to talk about how it relates to the Wheel of Consent specifically. And I hope to hear from you both again in the future, Kian. So yeah, do you want to give us an overview of what you're going to cover tonight? And John will come in on the discussion. We're going to do a whole series on the polyvagal theory later this year. So this is a wonderful start to that, Kian, and introduction to the topic for clinical practice body workers.
That's great. Thank you, Julian. Yeah, it's great to be here. So polyvagal theory is a very large topic with multiple areas of application and discussion. So I'm glad you'll be doing more focused and in-depth webinars in the future. This will be, as in the description, an introduction and overview with some implications for clinical practice. I'll just wrestle with my...
Yeah, if you want to go so we can see you full screen, feel free to turn your slideshow on and off if you wish.
Okay, thanks. So these are the topics. Everyone can see the slides, can they? Yep. So these are the topics I'm going to cover, essentially. I'll be explaining the terminology as I go along. Polyvagal theory essentially describes how we respond to the environment through a process Stephen Porges calls neuroception, which is our perception of safety and danger, essentially. And the theory has major implications for our health and for how we interact with others. I'm lacking the co-regulating effect of seeing other people live here. So if I start to panic, which I might, then feel free to send me any messages of support or request to slow down, for example.
You can also pin one of our videos if you want to see John Wilkes, or you can take your pick, or you can pin my video and unpin it to see your slides again.
Excellent. So a word on terminology. Anatomy is often portrayed as an exact science, but it's not. It's evolving and interpretive, and there are often numerous and conflicting interpretations, different kinds of terminology. So I'll be describing the interpretation and using the terminology that makes the most sense to me. And I'll say something about other interpretations. So I'll discuss the evolution and function of the triune autonomic nervous system first, and then go on to polyvagal anatomy afterwards. The polyvagal anatomy is ventral versus dorsal vagal nerves. So on the bottom of this slide, bottom right, or the bottom is the autonomic nervous system, which is normally defined as automatic or involuntary. So it regulates our heart rate, our breathing, and like a lot of anatomical conventions, it's a generalization to say it's involuntary, because yogis and monks and Wim, the Dutch chap, has demonstrated that people can bring it under voluntary control with a little focus. The triune aspect, triune meaning three, so the three branches are the parasympathetic branch, the sympathetic branch, and the social engagement branch. And I'm including the enteric nervous system with the parasympathetic branch here. In anatomy, often the autonomic nervous system is presented as a binary, as a seesaw binary of the parasympathetic and sympathetic. So one dilates the pupils, one constricts the pupils, sympathetic speeds up heart rate, parasympathetic slows heart rate. But that's also a simplification. I think our brains love a binary, don't they? I think it comes from possibly bacteria who you move towards stimulus or move away from stimulus, possibly something like that. So they're presented as a paired antagonistic system who inhibit each other. But polyvagal thing, was that Julian?
I just said, I turned my audio back on, give you some human feedback.
Thank you. Polyvagal theory describes it as based on a hierarchy that's based on evolution. So going from the right to the left, the parasympathetic is evolutionarily the most ancient branch of the nervous system, which was emerged with primitive reptiles as a primitive feeding and reproduction system. It creates a metabolic baseline to manage our oxygen reserves and nourish the blood. And because these animals have very small brains, if they're under stress or threat from a predator, they could slow down their heart rate and slow their breathing till it's virtually indetectable. They could go into an immobilized state and hope to avoid being eaten or caught. And we still have that circuit in our bodies. A newer circuit is a sympathetic nervous system, which is more sophisticated and enables mobility for feeding, defense and reproduction via limbs and muscles. That came on the scene a bit later. And the newer branch, innovated by the ventral vagal complex, is the social engagement system, or the social nervous system. It's been described as a sophisticated set of responses supporting our massive cortical development and enabling maternal bonding and extended protection of vulnerable immature brains, and also social cooperation leading to the development of language and social structures via facial functions. So this is something that we share with all mammals. And rather than a seesaw between parasympathetic and sympathetic, these can be seen as a hierarchical order. The higher nervous system arrangements, for us, the social engagement branch, inhibits or controls the lower branches. And this is called the theory of dissolution by John Hewlins Jackson, the father of English neurology in late 1800s. So if we're socially engaged, if we have the ventral vagal complex engaged and turned on online, then we have access to our sympathetic mobilization behaviors, our musculature. We can play, we can interact, and we have access to parasympathetic relaxation behaviors, digestion and relaxation. But if the social engagement goes offline, if we go into sympathetic arousal and fight or flight, then we no longer have access to the ventral vagal complex. So we play our best card first, social engagement system, seeking connection. If we're in a stress, we cry out, we seek connection, we seek others, we try and co-opt people to help us. And if that doesn't work, or we think it hasn't worked in the past, which is also possible, could be a belief, then we try a second best card, which is the sympathetic nervous system. fight, flight, or freeze. And if that doesn't work, we play our last card, which is going into immobilization, collapse, shut down, like the frightened reptile. Another thing about the typical presentation of the autonomic nervous system is that people talk about the sympathetic as fight or flight and the parasympathetic as rest and digest. But this is comparing different aspects. It's comparing the stress function of the sympathetic branch and the so-called normal function of the parasympathetic branch. So it's not comparing like with like, because the parasympathetic also has a stress response. So the sympathetic branch we're mostly used to, and trauma therapy focused almost exclusively on sympathetic activation for a long time. So that's fight, flight, freeze, cry out, run away. But when there's no opportunity to escape, like if a child's being abused by a younger person, or if you're being restrained, or you're in a room where you can't get out, then the body does its best to save you, which is going back to this ancient route of immobilization. So if there's a life threat perceived, your body can just cut out, which will be experienced as dissociation, as shutting down, as fainting. It's been called death feigning, but it's not voluntary. It could look like death, but it's not a voluntary action. Immobilization and defecation. So the important thing is that it's not a voluntary action. It's when your nervous system detects a life threat, it can shut down, and triggers that might trigger that could be apparently trivial to other people. And this is a useful thing to tell clients, because if someone's experienced this, they can think their body's betrayed them and build a narrative of being a victim, like, why didn't I fight back? Why didn't I cry out? And when they understand that it's actually not an intentional act, it's not something that's voluntary, this branch, then they can build a different narrative, a narrative of appreciating their body was trying to look after them, doing its best to look after them. And in humans, dissociation is part of that response. So you can literally shut down, so you have no physical function, you can't move, or you can dissociate to a greater or lesser degree, but that's still mediated by the dorsal vagal complex, the parasympathetic branch. And Porges talked about neuroception, which is the act of, not the act, but the process by which we constantly scan for safety or lack of safety. So some physical symptoms of activation of these different branches. Parasympathetic would be lower respiration, deeper breathing, slow pulse rate, decreased blood pressure, pupil constriction, lack of facial features, facial expression, dry, warm skin, increased digestion, and immobilized behaviors like indecisiveness, seclusion, depression. Sympathetic activation would be like faster respiration, heart rate, pupil dilation, pale skin, increased sweating, cold skin, decreased digestion, and mobilization behaviors like anxiety, anger, and fear. And then our newest circuit, the social engagement circuit, or social nervous system, behaviors associated with that are voice and eye contact, capacity for empathy, social interaction, spontaneous feelings, involuntary motor actions of the face, mouth, and throat, like smiling, facial warmth, tingling, and interpersonal responses of awareness, like involuntary physical responses to people. So those are stress responses of the autonomic nervous system. And say something about the so-called normal functions. Parasympathetic is useful for resting and rebuilding, for digesting, and resting is different to sleep. Like sleep's one aspect of it, but you can be deeply, deeply relaxed without sleeping, doing a different thing. Meditative states, sexual arousal, So erectile tissue is a function of parasympathetic arousal. The 4 stages of sleep and baseline metabolism like heart, breath, and digestion. And the sympathetic nervous system is useful for mobility and for recreational play, for excitement, for muscular activity, for climax and ejaculation, orgasm, and for daytime alertness and metabolism. And the social nervous system is active in love language, to kind of touch, expressions of closeness and intimacy, of sex, the afterglow of sex, of maternal bonding, of social organisation, and very much to do with vocalisation, with breath, with prosody. So Porges talks about prosodic intonation, which is a song-like, sing-song, the kind of voice you might use with a child or a dog or a loved one if you're in a good place together. And reciprocal play, all parts of the social engagement system. So Porges talks about we are social animals and we need to interact. It's part of our biology. It's an evolutionary imperative. We evolved to support each other and to connect, and we need each other to do that. And it talks about connectedness being the ability to synchronously and reciprocally respond. So a place where this might be noticed by people is if you don't get a response to your text message or email straight away, it can start to build anxiety because we're used to co-regulating with immediate feedback from facial cues and interactions. We need to connect.
Well said.
We need to connect to thrive and to self-regulate. So we've evolved to be a system to be connected, and connectedness provides a neurobiological mechanism to link social behaviour with mental and with physical health. And something that Porges comes back to again and again is when the autonomic nervous system is recruited for defence, then our physical and mental health are compromised because we don't digest properly, our circulation doesn't work optimally, our resources are diverted to other areas other than digestion and wellness. And the quest for safety being a quest for homeostasis and co-regulation, and cues of safety slow our heart rate down, they slow our breathing down, and this is unique to mammals. So we need cues of safety from others through neuroception to turn off our ancient fear circuits. Here's an example of face-to-face behaviours co-regulating our state. So we're looking at mirrored facial expression, mirrored gestures. There will probably be prosodic vocalization. This maintains a physiological state that supports health and growth and restoration, and optimizes the ability to rest, to relax, to sleep, to digest, to perform all of our bodily functions. Feelings of love, safety, and trust are a challenge for mammals. We evolved as food for reptiles, and our primary objective is to stay alive. So we're constantly scanning for threat, and those old circuits are very active. And what can help reduce cues of danger and enhance cues of safety are face-to-face connection, face-heart connection. The muscles of the eye are a somatic marker of connection. It's an explicit cue for an implicit feeling of reciprocity. So you can see some of these pictures there, their eyes are furrowed, and that's a muscle that's innervated by the ventral vagal complex. The polyvagal theory explains how social interactions recruit neural circuits that support health, growth, and restoration, while cues of danger and life threat recruit neural circuits that disrupt bodily processes. So this is some pictures of people regulating, and you can also have a break in social regulation, like in this picture of George Bush grabbing Angela Merkel non-consensually. So there's been disrupted co-regulation there, and they haven't made a repair. So in the in the last two slides, you can see them looking away from each other. And I don't imagine their negotiations went very well after that. But disconnecting face-to-face behavior can trigger biobehavioral states of defense and arousal and alertness, but they can also be repaired. This is a picture of the first week of a set of two twins. They were in separate incubators and not expected to live, and a nurse fought the hospital rules and placed them together in an incubator. And when placed together, the healthier of the two threw her arm over her sister in an embrace. And the small baby's heart rate stabilized and her temperature rose to normal. That's co-regulation in action.
Beautiful.
So the social engagement system is involved in most aspects of social contact and pleasure. Guides eye contact, hearing, eating, speech, singing, nursing, kissing, smiling, and direct heart-to-heart contact. So the newer mammalian branch of the vagus connects the heart and the lungs to the brainstem. And 80% of the fibers are afferent, so they're going from the body to the brainstem, to the central nervous system. So they're taking signals from the bottom up and communicating with you. And then from the brainstem, the ventral vagal complex moves around to the muscles of the face, which we'll come to in a moment. The term polyvagal comes from the origin of the respective vagal nerves. So the dorsal vagal complex, so-called, does not innervate the back of the body, but it originates from the back of the brainstem. And the ventral vagus nerve originates from the ventral area of the brainstem towards the front of the body. And in the social engagement system, we talk about the ventral vagal complex because it's more than the vagal nerve alone. That ventral branch of the vagal nerve includes the trigeminal nerve, the facial nerve, the glossopharyngeal nerve, the vagal nerves, and the orbicularis oculi, the little muscles of the eye that indicate when we're smiling and we mean it. And because its role is in making contact with people favourable, the ventral vagal system is a way of achieving personal safety, but it also requires a moderate amount of actual safety to develop or stay employed. So prolonged states of danger or stress or danger in early life can atrophy or impair its development, and they can be redeveloped and brought online again. The main neurotransmitters are oxytocin, vasopressin, and endorphins. So what's next? Yeah, so that's what I expected. Good. So this is the ventral vagal nerve pathway is in bold here at the top around the neck, and the dorsal vagal nerve pathway is the dotted line. And the vagus is mapping the state of the body to the insula in the brain. So in total, 80 to 90% of vagal fibers are afferent, that is, taking information to the central nervous system. The supradiaphragmatic vagus, that's above the diaphragm, are myelinated. So it's a different quality of nerve. It has myelination, it's faster. It innervates the facial muscles and the muscles of the neck, of the throat, and vocalization, as well as connected to the heart and lungs. It innervates the muscles of mastication and also the middle ear muscles. So if cues of threat are triggered, the ears tune into low frequencies to detect predators. Mammals have a detached ear bone from the jaw, so it allows us to hear higher frequencies than reptiles can hear. And when unsafe, we tune into a lower frequency band. So if someone's feeling under stress, it's an adaptive shift to be vigilant for danger. But people can be triggered by low voices, by rumbling, by air conditioning, by fridges. They become defensive, and they probably won't be aware of the trigger. but it cues the defensiveness the predators are coming. And in this state, people can develop hearing hypersensitivities. They can have difficulty hearing the ends of words because higher frequencies can be lost. So voices tend to be higher pitched in humans, and in sympathetic nervous system activation, we're looking out for low and muffled sounds. Underneath the diaphragm, subdiaphragmatic vagal nerve, which is the dorsal vagal complex, is unmyelinated. It elevates the viscera and the digestion and extends to uteruses in people who have them. So the dorsal vagal response is implicated in IBS, for example, because it elevates the guts. When the dorsal vagal complex has been recruited for defense, then it's no longer available to regulate digestion. And yep.
It's good to state, isn't it? Because until I'd heard that, the point before this current point you're making about the low frequency sounds, there's a lot of them in modern life, isn't there? Like airplane, some airplane noises, some are high, but like a fridge, you mentioned the fridge. But in people's practice, if they can eliminate surrounding low frequency sounds, it can help create the conditions for the sense of safety in people that might be prone to being dysregulated by that and may not know it. And it's another thing that we can spread awareness to in our clients, isn't it? If
yeah. And the thing about these neuroception, these triggers, is mostly they're below level of awareness. So we feel a response in the body. That's the first thing we're aware of. We're not aware of necessarily the trigger or why it was triggered.
Yeah.
So we pay attention to what we're feeling in our body, then we can start to look in the environment for, because often we ascribe meaning to it, which may or may not be valid.
Yeah.
I'm feeling scared, and then you might blame someone or something or some event.
And isn't the theory that those were linked to the growls and predatory sounds of other animals in our evolutionary past?
Yeah, and particularly of reptiles when we were very small mammals.
And I suppose earth events like earthquakes and tectonic activity has a low frequency often sound to it, so maybe natural disasters as well. It's just a speculation anyway.
Run away. Yeah. He just talks about how babies often are distressed by their father's voices if they have a low voice.
Mm-hmm.
He says the cure for that is to speak in a falsetto. And although the parasympathetic nervous system is often called rest and digest, not all vagal pathways support downregulation or enhanced resilience or social communication. So the dorsal vagal can also be potentially lethal, and it's thought to be the mechanism in voodoo death and in animals who die of fright.
Someone's mentioned there, Kian, there seems to be a link to the appendix. Many have appendix removed. How significant can this be in the vagal complex?
I don't know, but that's an interesting thing to look into.
Yeah.
So moving into neuroception a bit more. The important thing to remember about the autonomic nervous system is that it's involuntary, mostly out of conscious control. Neuroception describes our constant scanning for cues of danger and safety below our conscious awareness, like low frequency noise. The ANS controls the body's involuntary activity, including essential survival functions like respiration, metabolism, as well as our stress responses, such as fight or flight, as well as freeze. And its job is to assure our survival, achieved through constant adaptation to changing conditions. So this biological imperative is too important to be left to chance or to voluntary control. The ANS is hardwired to avoid disaster. So if you focus on the response in your body rather than the stimulus, that's a good thing to look out for. to become aware that you've been triggered by something. So this is a slide depicting neuroception. When it's safe, social engagement is easy. When there's danger, the next level is fight or flight, sympathetic activation. If there's a severe life threat, we can go into shutdown.
Kian?
Yeah.
You want me to save questions to the end, or if they're relevant, shall I feed them in? Because there's 2 here.
Don't know.
Shall I read them to you now?
Okay.
And you can decide to answer them now or later. So someone else says there's an emphasis on low sounds here. My experience is that high-pitched voices are triggers. I think it's important to be aware that high pitch can also be a trigger a lot for a defense response as well. So that's someone's experience. And Guillaume, sorry. In Portugal here, we say Guillaume. Can you talk about the vagus connection to the cervix for women and the prostate for men? Any connection to the anus? 3 questions in one there.
Yeah. Oh, anus is one of my favourite topics. So let's go back to the anus there. In this slide at the bottom, you can see the ganglion of Impar, which is a nerve plexus that is very close to the anal opening. And there's the gold there is the sympathetic nervous system, and the red is the parasympathetic. So I don't think it connects exactly, but anatomy is curious. A nerve might lead on from another nerve, and they give it a different name, and it can be hard to connect them up. The work I've seen says that people with uteri and cervixes have a direct vagal connection, and I wonder if, because the testes begin in the trunk of the body and descend, I wonder if there might be a vestigial connection, but I haven't found any evidence for that. And hearing hypersensitivity can be part of the same hearing adaptation.
And another participant, Mark, has said, can you speak to the effect of nerves not being myelinated or unmyelinated? Am I right in thinking it means that slower signals transmission speed?
Yeah, myelinated nerves is a much faster transmission speed. So the ventral vagal complex is myelinated and also much newer, evolutionarily.
Mm-hmm.
So this is an example of a safe state, green light, and the environment is safe, so we're free to engage in social engagement with a social engagement system, play, which recruits the sympathetic nervous system, and intimacy, which recruits immobilization with safety. So lying in a cuddle puddle or lying with a lover, you're immobilized, but you're safe. Immobilized and you're safe. It's very different to be immobilized in terror or in danger. So all 3 levels of your nervous system, all 3 circuits are accessible in this state. And I'm going to describe 3 circuits and 5 states. So there's a sympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic, and social engagement system. And the sympathetic has 2 states, with or without safety, and the parasympathetic has 2 states, with or without safety. So that thing says VVC on the left, ventral vagal complex. So that's ventral vagal complex engaged, social engagement is possible, safe. This is mobilization, sympathetic activation with safety. And this is the second optional state of the sympathetic nervous system in this simplistic diagram, but it's quite accurate, useful, is sympathetic activation without safety. So that's fight, flight, freeze. And here we have dorsal vagal parasympathetic activation with safety. So social engagement is online. We can immobilize with safety and in pleasure. So that's that could be trance states as well, deep relaxation. And in life threat, when fight or flight fails, the dorsal vagal part of the parasympathetic can immobilize us. And humans have various ways of exhibiting immobilization behaviors. So as said, dissociation, depression, these are all aspects of dorsal vagal circuitry. And if you've been in a situation where, like I have giving a talk, for example, and I'm suddenly immobilized, that's the dorsal vagal complex. And this is a nice diagram my friend, colleague Matthias Schwantek came up with, which depicts it really well. So there's the 3 circuits there on the left, safe or unsafe, and you can move between them. I've used the emotional command systems here in the sympathetic level, but in the red it could be fight, flight, freeze. These are the emotional command systems of Yak Panksepp. And with safety, you could be playing, you could be involved in sport or in work, or in sex, or in sport. But you're mobilizing with safety, you're mobilizing without fear. And the bottom level, in life threat, you're going into shutdown or a shame response, which is a sort of emotional corollary of the shutdown response. On the other side is rest, intimacy, bliss, trance, relaxation. And you can move between these spheres quite aerobically, like you can move between them back and forth, depending on what's happening. Like you can feel scared and someone can give you a smile or give you a hug, and then suddenly you're back into play again. So mostly you can move back and forth, but if you're in the bottom left in shutdown, then it's probably not possible to move from that into bliss or from that straight into social engagement without going through the sympathetic nervous system. And this slide, so these are some slides from Stephen Porges, used with permission, kindly, describing some clinical possible applications of these systems. So the social engagement system, the myelinated vagus is in green there. So that's when you're in communication, you're able to regulate your state. You're co-regulating with others probably, or you're able to regulate yourself. And in sympathetic activation, you could be playing, or you could be in hyperarousal, fight, flight, and that can result behaviorally in anxiety, in gut problems in anxiety. And moving into the dorsal vagal, clinical issues there could be low blood pressure, fibromyalgia, IBS, and dissociative states, depression, body numbness. Porges has actually got a body numbness scale that he has a link to, where people can attempt to track their autonomic nervous system activation or lack thereof. And this is from the writings of John Chitty, who's very recently passed away, sadly, from the Energy School. He's got lots of really great polyvagal resources there that are available for free, as well as a book. This is comparing the old view and the new view, where the parasympathetic nervous system and the ANS was viewed as just doing its thing, and now it's my view and Porges' view is that it's supremely important, and that without social engagement, nothing else really works properly. So we have to. But it's good to prioritize social engagement, to prioritize eye contact, smiling, mirroring each other's movements, so demonstrating connection. The fact that the vagal nerve connects the heart to the central nervous system means that the heart is visible in our faces. So the term heart connected is a very literal thing and something that can be seen and appreciated by other people. So this is saying cooperation is a biological imperative, it's hardwired, and to be healthy, we need to feel safe. So with clients, they're unlikely to learn or to heal or to respond to manipulation or to suggestions or to offered interventions if they don't feel safe. And the subtitle of the Pocket Guide to Polyvagal Therapy by Porges is The Transformative Power of Safety. That kind of sums up his view. So a new paradigm here is that social behaviour is learned. Because certainly when I was growing up at school, if I behaved in a way people didn't want me to behave, then people would shout at me. So that's putting me into sympathetic activation where I lose contact with my social engagement system. And what if social behaviour is an emergent property of specific neurophysiological states? So rather than tell people what to do, if we engage with them, if we bring them online, if we demonstrate empathy and compassion, then social behaviour can emerge spontaneously. And as in the theory that I've forgotten the name of, social engagement system inhibits the lower order defences, the stress responses of the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems. So the new intervention becomes supporting the social engagement system and co-creating that through co-regulation. So I said I'd talk about some common misconceptions. Where are they? See if I can reload that.
Thank you, Kian. Lana Blue on Facebook said, I love how you used laying in a cuddle puddle as an example of immobilization with safety. On Betty Martin's training, she talks about some assessment methods, which I guess are testing our ability to mirror each other, make funny facial expressions. This is something to do with our clients, isn't it? To see, it also brings up shame in a lot of people, so it could be triggering, but to see how fluid we are with our ability to mirror each other.
Yeah.
Someone's just said here, in the social engagement system, if the social engagement system causes the defense systems to be unavailable, can this then become available at the drop of a hat? i.e. when one perceives the lack of safety in someone that they have been trusting. Yes, it's always scanning, isn't it, Kian?
The theory of dissolution, that's the term. Yeah, so it can go, the social engagement system can go offline in a nanosecond. And when it's online, then then it can inhibit those the fight or flight responses. I think, and Porges does an exercise sometimes with sitting next to someone, and they do breathing, and the focus isn't on the person breathing; it's on the person sitting next to them. So I'm noticing how I'm feeling in response to their breathing, and when they focus on the inhale, I notice feeling anxiety, not safe, and when they focus on the exhale, I notice feeling, oh, they're a really nice person. I want to be with that person. So it was a very visceral demonstration of neuroception and co-regulation, because they weren't trying to do anything with me at all, but I responded to their breathing patterns. So a few misconceptions here. Some writers, I'm not saying this is wrong, I'm just saying that's my preferred terminology, talk about the social engagement system as parasympathetic. And according to the work I've read, the ventral vagal complex includes motor nerves as well as parasympathetic nerves, and it should be considered as a separate system. It's not parasympathetic because it includes motor fibers, so it's a different thing altogether. So that's why I like Chitty's use of triune autonomic nervous system with 3 branches that are distinct and separate. the behaviour is learned and intentional, we just spoke about, rather than an emergent property of your neurophysiological state. And a corollary of that is the misconception that the most important part of a therapeutic interaction is to get to the action, to get to the emotion, the emoting, the catharsis, the release, whatever. In the polyvagal worldview, the most important element of an interaction is the ANS state of those involved, the practitioner and the client, or the group, everyone, because we're co-regulating. So the primary importance becomes supporting the social engagement system through rapport or mirroring, eye contact, as having that online is a prerequisite for learning and relaxation. And also reminds me of a story in the Healing Power of the Vagal Nerve by Porges. He talks about he had a back problem, a slipped disc, and he was in the queue for surgery on pain meds and stuff. And the author of the book, I think it's Jack Rosenthal, said, I can cure that in 3 seconds. And he just asked him to get on all fours, and the way he touched him communicated safety, and his body just reorganized and the disc slipped back into place. Wow. So it's not just a mental thing, it works on all levels of our body mind. Mm-hmm. We're safe, we're open to reorganization and new data. And another pet hate is using the word freeze to describe both sympathetic activation and also vagal shutdown, which is a valid thing to do, but I think it's very confusing. So I like to use freeze as a sympathetic response, fight, flight, freeze, as distinct from the parasympathetic shutdown, immobilization, death feigning response. So some clinical implications are to support the social nervous system. So with this understanding, the protection and support of our newest and most powerful ANS division is anatomically and physiologically confirmed as a top priority in client care. We can do this through passively, through intending to deliver cues of safety, and actively through exercises, through engaging, through eye contact, through breathing exercises, for example. I'll say a bit more about in a minute. Other implications are to emphasize interpersonal rapport. So in healthcare and education settings, feelings of social warmth optimize our inner autonomic processes for maximum immune system performance, for self-healing efficiency, and for learning capacity. And finally, to focus on betrayal trauma, as traumas involving betrayal, painful actions from a trusted person, are known to have a particularly deep effect, and recognition of the social nervous system explains these effects. In betrayal PTSD, the highest and most modern autonomic nervous system function, the social engagement system, is damaged at a conscious, subconscious, implicit memory level, often with long-lasting effects on wellness and resilience. However, these are reversible. And Paul just had this nice quote, neurons that fire together, wire together. If you feel safe and loved, your brain becomes specialized in exploring, playing cooperation. If you're frightened, if you feel frightened and unwanted, it specializes in managing feelings of fear and abandonment. So this is how our social engagement system can be impacted by developmental traumas. Here are some examples of things we can do. Essentially, make social engagement your number one priority. Is the bottom line. So all the things that people talk about in rapport building, so eye contact, but not so much that it's weird, sensitive eye contact, mirroring words, mirroring body language, giving people choice where they sit, how they interact with your environment. These all give cues of safety. So that's number 2 on the list there, engaging passive pathways to elicit safety and downregulate defenses. And number 1 is to avoid cues of danger if possible, like sudden movement, those sounds. I mean, we don't know what's going to trigger someone necessarily, and we can intend to not deliver cues of danger. And thirdly, we can engage active pathways by voluntary behaviours. And some examples of active interventions, which are neural exercises of the vagal brake. The vagal brake is the mechanism that slows down heart rate and slows breathing. For example, vocalizing. So in my practice, we often do breathing with a sigh on the exhale. Sighing, sounding, chanting activates the laryngeal nerves, part of the social complex. And respiration engages a vagal brake on exhalation. So in breathing, when we breathe in, it activates the sympathetic nervous system essentially. When we breathe out, it activates the parasympathetic nervous system, and with a brake on, it slows down our heart rate as well. So if we emphasize the exhale, we'll be inducing a parasympathetic state. So vocalization, breathing, engaging the vagal brake during exhalation, and also abdominal stretching when you're deep breathing, which sends afferent signals to the central nervous system of relaxation during inhalation. And posture, the carotid baroreceptors sense our position in space, and being horizontal, or especially having your head lowered, sends signals to lower your heart rate because of your blood pressure. So most traditions have this in prayer, Islam and Judaism, and often in Christianity, you'll be bowing down. This is calming because it lowers your blood pressure and engages a vagal brake. So those are some things you can do, and the most crucial thing is just to be aware of this, that there are these systems, and being aware of them in ourselves. And it can also be really useful to tell people about, particularly if someone's been at the effect of immobilization and blaming themselves, or if they feel a feeling of dissociation or shame, saying that it's an autonomic nervous system way of establishing safety can help them unravel a narrative of increasing shame and victimhood. Mm-hmm. This slide is from a really nice paper by Porges called Ventral Vagal Pathways, Portals to Compassion, which you can find online. And there's a few other recommended books here. The bottom one is the first book, and that's not so accessible. But the top ones are more recent. The clinical insights on the right is lots of articles with Porges explaining things. That's useful. And the other one's really great as well. And Accessing the Healing Power of the Vagal Nerve is by Stanley Rosenberg, who's a physical therapist that has lots of really interesting exercises in. That is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Fantastic, Kian. Thank you. John, are you around? Are you going to join us back with your video? Yeah, there's a lot of thanks on Facebook, and a lot of people have been watching it there as well, Kian.